everyone. This is Antonio Barona, CEO of Sustainable Innovations. We're back again to a new episode of our Quarantine Chronicles. And today we'll talk about the pharma industry. In this episode, I have my very good friend, Monika. She's a high-level, C-level executive, and we will try to squeeze her brain and get as much as interested facts from this industry for our audience. So, hi, Monika. How are you today? How's Boston?
Hi, hi Antonio. Nice to see you. Nice to hear you. It's great. We have a fantastic weather. Finally, the spring started, so I'm very excited to be here.
Okay, great. So let's start. Today's objectives will be, okay, on one side, to really know, to have the opportunity to speak with a C-level professional. Today, main objectives on one side is to know a C-level professional from the biopharma industry, to understand her background, her experience, and how did she get there. The second point of our conversation is going to be the interaction about Pharmaworld and sustainability and what is the situation right now in COVID-19. And at the end, we're gonna pick Monika's brain and to try to get some final thoughts about how young professionals should face this current global pandemic. So this is a little bit what we have on the table. Also together what we have on the screen, which is pretty much what I have just described. And well, right now I'm gonna let my very good friend Monika to speak, to give us the introduction.
Thank you, Antonio. So I will not try to bore you too much when it comes to my background, but as I will try to share information which could be helpful for a young professional like you. I started in the biopharmaceutical industry for more than 20 years ago, and I started working in operations and in sales. Then moved to clinical research organizations, which are slightly different. They are part of life science sector, but they are actually not part of pharma. Work a little bit there, moved to United States 15 years ago. My dream was always to be fully responsible for the whole process of the drug development. And that's how I shaped my career. I went where the opportunity were. I worked for large biopharmaceutical companies and medical device companies, finally taking accountability for the project management and development of the molecules in different therapeutic areas, and also in medical devices space and diagnostic space. The companies I was working for were Wyatt, now part of Pfizer. I work for Pfizer, for Covidien, which is part of Medtronic right now, for Merck, and AstraZeneca. I think Big Pharma is fantastic when it comes to learning. That's why I choose my way to start really learning from the best on the market. And I think that's a really good thing to do for younger professionals. Just consider that. Although after going to Harvard Business School, I decided to change directions and start working for startups in biotechnology sector and also in life science sector. This is where I'm really finding my passion, because after so many years in the drug development, where you were working in a safety net of the big pharma, you can actually use your skills and the full skill set to really contribute and build the value for the company and shareholders. I found that experience very enriching. I currently working as a consultant, working with the innovative startups, so various startups in medical technology space, and working with the founding teams. Essentially what I do, I provide my know-how to strengthen business plans and product market fit and develop methods for scaling business. I also work with founders and startup teams to introduce them to a necessary ecosystem to thrive, customers, partners, and venture capital, because that's part of my job. And I find it really, really interacting with all those parts really challenging and very enriching, as I said.
I think there are some specific topics that that you highlight on your experience. It's the ones that we can see now on the screen
Mm-hmm.
regarding drug development, portfolio program, and project management. Um, can you extend a little bit on that and how important was this in your professional life?
Sure. So as mentioned initially, I went really from clinical research organizations, which are really supportive. They provide services to pharma, to pharmaceuticals. This is quite a jump for many people because working in a service provider is slightly different than working, being accountable for the product development. My trajectory allowed me to really be exposed to very early stages, in the midst, after, early discovery, and also going into more late phases. And my clinical operational background actually allowed me to really be an expert in clinical development. And clinical development is basically, everything which connects science and the outcomes when it comes to safety and efficacy in clinical patients. So I was gradually going from project management to real program management, which means that you manage multiple projects within the same under the same umbrella. So this means that you have the same product, but you have various indications, for example, or different products under the same indication. So I broaden my strength and my expertise, going from simple project management to program management, and also work in portfolio management, which is the next level, which means that you manage multiple programs, which means bunch of different projects which are related to each other under different umbrellas. So much to learn. Those very complex processes and very big number of different experts and different fields that you need to really understand. That's why it takes so much time.
Okay, so thank you. I think now we have quite an understanding of who is Monika, what's her background, and her professional career. Now let us jump directly to the core of this conversation. So, how do you see the connection with the sustainability and the pharma industry? The environmental impacts within this industry. Can
Yeah.
you expand a little bit on that?
Yeah. So pharma is one of the dirtiest sectors, and that means not only it's dirtier than automotive sector, and many people don't realize it. The problem is that pharma should really take a deep look into what they do to the environment. And many companies did that already. Okay, many companies did allow to follow the Paris climate agreement, and they are very transparent when it comes to reporting of the emissions. So you can really see what they're about, what they are going to improve in the future as well, their goals and objectives. But there's only there's a lot of pharmas out there, like more than 200 big companies, and only 25 really systematically reported from 2015. And that's really small number. That's really small number. There are a lot of different various questions around pharma and the impact on the environment. And where pharma is actually contributing to pollutions and to the gas emission. Few things come in mind. So there's a lot of there's a lot of, I would say, things which we could improve, but we need some pressure. So I think from the policymaker standpoint, governmental standpoint, there needs to be pressure. There needs to be pressure from investors. There needs to be pressure for customers and NGOs, organizations. So I think with that, some of those aspects can really improve, and we can increase the ability of the pharma to really create meaningful plans and programs for sustainability, allow them to really come up with ideas to measure specific targets when it comes to wastewater, discharges, when it comes to presence of the different pharmaceutical ingredients in environment, their impact on environment. Those programs need to really be defined and controlled very well by the government. So this is where there's a specific space for improvement, because there's no pressure, there will be no change. And I'm really a firm believer in that, because I don't count on the corporate goodwill to really improve the environment. I think the pressure is really essential. In pharma, we impact the environment in many, many different ways. So one of them, and one of the most things which are really scary and very challenging, is the antimicrobial resistance. So in a product development, when you produce manufacturing, there seems to be pollution and the discharge of those active molecules into the environment and water, and that's increased the resistance of the different microbes to antibiotics. And that's something that requires really good environmental planning, environmental management practices across the whole supply chain in pharma. And some pharma has that already, and some they don't, and that's really critical. Also, one thing to mention, this is also very important, the manufacturing of certain components and compounds are actually concentrated in Asia, and majority are in India and China. And that's really also really bad for environment, because all the specific pollutions goes into those areas. We have an issue on the top of that with the needles, syringes, and injections devices, because disposal of those is really critical. Improper disposal can lead to harm and a widespread disease, and that's definitely something the pharma needs to take care of. And that means accountability, responsibility for the product they sell. And another aspect is the disposal of the active pharmaceutical products. So obviously there should be a system in place to minimize the impact on the environment coming from the packaging, and just logically reducing the number, I would say the quantity of the material that is used for packaging is also environmental friendly. And it can translate to price saving for the customers, for the patients. So that's also another part of the puzzle. Some pharmas are very good in it, and some pharmas have already reached emission control, which is according to the Paris Agreement. But for the rest of the pharmas, it means that we need to reduce emissions by 59% from what the levels were in 2015 to be compliant by 2025, which seems like an impossible mission. But I think, everything is possible. When you look at what's going on with coronavirus, how much the industry mobilized to discover vaccine or treatment, this is unprecedented, and that really gives hopes that there's a motivation, certain things can be achieved. And I really a firm believer in that. And I think pharma can really do a lot of improvements in this area um, to help the planet, basically.
Okay, so that's really interesting, Monica. So what you're saying is that there is still a lot of opportunities for research within the pharma industry for looking for solutions that could help mitigate those impacts, and at the same time, business opportunities for a company who would like to do some research and innovation within this area. So you jumped a little bit onto the next topic of our conversation, which is um, the connection of what is happening in the industry towards the COVID-19. You know, so
Mhm.
you mentioned about the deglobalization of the supply chain, but I would say that this is a very interesting industry right now worldwide. You know, the whole world is expecting to have a vaccine as soon as possible. You know, but I don't know if this industry has been hit so much during the last couple of weeks. So, what is the status of the industry? What is the expectations, and what is the main changes that we're
Yeah.
going to be seeing in the next few months?
Okay, that's a great question. Obviously, I think what is apparent to everyone, and that's what is visible, is that there's a tremendous pressure for, on the whole, biotechnology and also pharmaceutical industry to really develop the treatment as soon as possible. And I can tell you that this changes so rapidly. The speed is just huge. How many companies and academic centers are actually moving towards that goal. I checked clinicaltrial.gov, which is the US repository of all the clinical studies that are ongoing, and there was more than 1,100 clinical studies on that page. It shows the volume of the research which is already in place. And obviously there are some companies which are ahead of everyone already in clinical studies, and that's really reassuring. Everyone counts on vaccine, but the timeline now we hear even can be January for the next year, which is much shorter than previously communicated. Normally that takes many years. We were talking about initially that can take maybe 18 months or so to bring the vaccine. Now looks it's going to be potentially much shorter time frame. It's just because there's so much effort, and the industry is collaborating so closely, which is also unprecedented. So once we move to the clinical stages, we are going to have 5 to 6 different candidates. The vaccines which are going to use a slightly different mechanism. They are going to be designed differently, and they are going to go into very compressed development phase where everything happens basically the same time. So that will allow us, to speed up the development, because not all the vaccines will work, and not all the vaccines are going to be safe to be used. But only with that massive effort of really pushing as many candidates for the development as possible is going to allow us to have really a win hopefully several months. On the top of that, we have vaccine, but we have also what started to is used in hospital is the plasma taken from donors, that actually people who already experience COVID-19 disease, and they develop hopefully immunity, and that's why that plasma is used in patients to treat them if they are in poor condition. We have potential antibodies that we develop as well, plus antivirals. And we talk a lot about remdesivir, which is a product from Gilead Sciences. They already completed a 1,000 patient study, and shows that the recovery of patients treated by the drug is few days, 4 days shorter. It was 11 days versus the patients who received placebo, which means they didn't get a drug. That was four days reduction. And that seems to be a really significant proof of concept for that specific drug, but it's still early. You know, we need to have thousands of patients to really be tested in order to drive any conclusions. But that's also very, very helpful. So drugs is one thing. There's also pressure on the life science sector, on medical device diagnostic part, to develop testing and making that testing really broadly available. Because that's part of, you know, making sure that the cases are isolated, you don't spread the disease, but also a very important part of really recovering from the crisis and coming back to work. Because I think majority of countries will have, similar to Asian countries, will have those protocols to test the employees and make sure that anybody with a fever, anybody with disease is isolated, is not spreading the disease to others. So those things, you know, they're really prominent. The pressure is really prominent, but that's a good thing, because, you know, with that pressure, there's so much development, and pharma is really going with a crazy speed to achieve that goal and bring some medicines to the market, to the patients. On the top of that, we know this is a kind of positive, news. On the less positive news, you know, pharma is also impacted by social distancing, by those protocols, and majority of the offices, except some laboratories, are shut down. People are working from home, which is not that bad, because, you know, I'm in drug development. I worked remotely for many years, and I was fine, and my teams were remote, so we certainly can do it. For some parts of organization, this is completely new. So for sales, you know, salespeople didn't used to working on Zoom, and now they work with their key opinion leaders and with the customers online, and that's changed for them. There are several things which impacts the life of scientists. You know, the labs sometimes are shut down completely. However, the scientists are already deemed as essential employees of laboratories. So some labs they're open, but not everyone is allowed in the lab. You know, the crowd is not allowed, so they need to have a limited number of people working there. And that's actually slowing down the business from the discovery perspective. Also, there's a lot of cancellation. Almost every single event, conference was canceled, and those are very important from scientific perspective, because that's sharing the information, sharing the data, and that's shut down. And some of the conferences went online, but some of them are, you know, they are not taking place. They were canceled permanently.
Okay, thank you so much. I think I've learned so much about the pharma world. Uh,
I'm glad I'm
there are
helpful.
many things that I assumed, but I was not. Yeah, I mean, it's really nice to get this inside information. So I think next point that we have here, I believe we have covered a little bit through our conversation.
Mhm.
Um, is this something you would like to explain a little bit more on how to address environmental health? Pretty
Yeah,
much
I
related to
covered majority of that. Yes, but you know, so there are three things that really needs to improve. Okay, just bottom line is that we need to have a better control and oversight, and that's comes from policymakers. It's really from government on the pharma. Because you want to see consistency. Yes, you don't want to see 25 companies of 200 reporting their emissions and pollutions and being transparent or pretty transparent about it, and the rest, being negligent about it, because that's not okay. So that needs to be, you know, there needs to be oversight and standardization of those requirements across the industry, and that will allow you to better control outcomes. Yes, so that's one thing. The second thing is the programs. As I said, you need to have established science-driven, risk-based targets for specific substances which are discharged during the manufacturing, causing the groundwater pollutions and the environmental impact. You need to have those. You need to have a proper scrutiny around those. And the third chapter is the we need to make sure that there's a transparency in reporting, okay? Not only public companies should report, the private companies should also report the environmental impacts and the level of emissions, because that's not the standard those days. As I said, 25 of 200 companies really do it, which is a very, very low number. And sometimes, okay, I would question the how candid and how candid those companies are, because what I would like to see as a C-level individual, I would like to see the financial results and significant, and there should be connected to the environmental impact. But some companies just report financially differently for by division, and they dump, for example, all the emissions with all the divisions to one bucket, and you cannot really see where their impact is, how this connects to the financial results, etc., etc. And this is really important from shareholder perspective, from customer perspective, and environmental perspective. So whoever is really interested would like to see how the specific pharmaceutical company is actually doing, what they are doing to really help the environment. You should be able to really read those reports and have a clarity, and that's not the case right now. Some of the companies' reporting is really opaque. So those are the three buckets, I think, where the improvement space is, and where the companies could make significant contribution to.
We're addressing to the last part of the conversation. Let's say, I would say that most of these questions you have already solved it through this conversation. For me, there is one last question that I would like you to answer for us. Is, okay, you're a young professional. You just graduated not long ago, and turns out you're just living in this pandemic world. Based on your experience, what advice would you give to these young professionals for them to see how to navigate through this crisis?
Okay. I'm very compassionate when it comes to these times, especially to young students and people who are just entering the workforce, because the times are really unusual, and everyone who is searching for a job or is in a time where they switch careers, it's not something you could really guess. That's the pandemic is going to happen this year. It's going to erase your plans for 2020, but that's what it is, and that's what it requires from everyone to really kind of take a step back and think about what I can do and what I can still go with my plans. Basically, I think the answer is yes. Many things change. Yeah, sure, you cannot, but you can still search for a job. Okay. Many interviews and job interviews are done on Zoom. They are not in person anymore, but they still continue. The processes takes a little bit more time, and the life dynamic change just because people are so exposed to Zoom and phone calls, and usually the schedules are so busy and much more busy than when they were in the office. And that needs to be taken account. So all the processes takes a little bit more time, but still, there's still opportunity to search for jobs. There still will be opportunities, even with a lot of layoffs. The opportunities are created somewhere else. Yeah. So this is like when one certain door is closing, there are other doors which are open. Not all the industries are equally impacted. Pharma is actually the one that, just looking from perspective of the product demand, the product demand is always going to be there because patients are getting sick. This is essential product for patients. Yeah. So when you were observing what was going on Amazon, the immediately after lockdown in the United States, the sales of the OTC, which is over-the-counter medicines for flu and cold, they increased dramatically, a few 100%. So the pharma is in a great space. Pharma is not slowing down. They still need people, and especially big pharma. When it comes to smaller companies, you also need to take a look at them and see what is their financial situation, because they may be completely different in different place than the big pharma. They may struggle, may not be in a good place where they have money, and that's also something to consider. But the words go on. The pandemic is going to end, and I think what I would disencourage is really being depressed and sitting, not doing anything. I think we still need to force ourselves to go forward. We still need to motivate ourselves to really do what we wanted to do. Okay, if your plan was to find a job, apply and search for a job. Reach out to your networks, reach out to your friends, or build your network. Attend different events. There's a lot of Zoom opportunities, for education as well. You can go to school online. Harvard University actually have plenty of free courses and programs, and they're excellent. And people can educate and use that time really to be productive. And that's what I can recommend. Please stay as much as you can productive, and really try to find ways to bridge your current situation with the future goals, and be able to continue reaching out there and building a future.
Well, thank you so much, Monica. And in addition, I would say that if people are really curious, there is a big gap. There's a lot of opportunities between sustainability and the pharma industry, with all the problematics that we were talking. So we're talking that we need a lot of solutions.
Yes.
People can start looking for those solutions and start working. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of possibilities there. So Monica, thank you very much for your time. It was really interesting to have you within your Parental Chronicles. We learned so much about the pharma, and well, be safe.
Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure to be here and to talk about the pharmaceutical business. And I wish everyone a great week and a weekend.
Okay.
Bye
Bye-bye.
bye.